Hi, I'm Samantha Anderson, Director of Communications with Newton Public Schools, and I'm here with Superintendent Van Rankin. And we're here to give you a quick recap of last night's Board of Education meeting, as well as just answer any questions you may have. As always, feel free to leave them in the comment section and we'll get to them as soon as possible. All right, well, first off, Mr. Van Rankin, can you just explain again, we went over it last night, but how sports will work until Thanksgiving, because we've gotten that question a lot.
Yeah, right now, sports is going to follow the weekly gating criteria in terms of the original modes of operation. So when we pull those numbers on.
Right. Well, first off, Mr. Van Rankin,
sorry, guys.
can you just explain again? Sorry, the game played.
Okay. That's okay. For example, on Monday at 12:30 is when the numbers are released by the KDHE or by the KDHE. That's when I go in and create that gating sheet that I have for the last several Mondays for all of our board meetings to determine mode of operation. And we had two reds and a yellow. The yellow was the attendance, and the two reds were obviously the percent positive and the trend. And so that would put us in that orange mode of operation. So for example, between today and next Monday, through next Monday, because we won't have that mode determined until that data, there'll be no spectators at our events that we would host. And I don't believe that we're going to be hosting any this week. And the only ones we would be at the junior high level anyway. We're not involved in any additional postseason activities at the high school. So, and I believe the wrestling tournament or the wrestling match was actually canceled. So it's not going to affect any in-person attendance, but there wouldn't be any if we were hosting any activities. So until Thanksgiving, we will follow that pattern each week. I'll produce those numbers. There'll be an announcement, and that Tuesday is when we'll begin that mode of operation.
Okay, and yep, I saw a tweet today about the Chisholm wrestling match, so that is canceled for now. Another thing you all went over was the plaque at Lindley Hall. And would you just explain the decision the board made and what the next steps are?
Well, there was a decision made before my time about creating a plaque up on Lindley Hall that addressed some of the issues associated with that. What is essentially going to happen is the board president, through the discussion, came up with or has directed the board, and it was a consensus of the board to move forward in this manner. Two of our board members are going to lead a committee, and the other 5 board members each are going to appoint a member to that committee that is going to essentially determine what needs to happen in relation to that plaque. And any other outlying things that they want to bring up as it might relate to that, to make sure that they address the controversy around the Lindley Hall issue. Me still being the new guy in that regard, I don't have as much background information obviously as others do, but they're going to get community input. You know, there was mention of the historical society, the local historical society being involved. So, you know, kind of stay tuned for how that's going to play out. So that's how that worked.
All right. And one parent wanted to clarify, even though the wrestling match is canceled, there's still going to be a wrestling season following all the different gating criteria, right?
You know, yes. I mean, the only thing, if we were in that red mode of operation, then during that time frame, there would not be practices or anything, okay? As soon as we were out of that red, in terms of the gating, then the practices and stuff could continue. Everything would be remote in red. And you know, it's kind of weird you think remote. Well, like Scholars Bowl and stuff like that, they've actually had some remote Scholars Bowl tournaments. So that could happen virtually. You know, so yes, that's how that'll work. We don't plan to cancel any seasons, but you know, we didn't plan to do a lot of the things that we're having to make pivots on as it relates to getting through the pandemic.
And then Mandy, can you just talk about, you were talking about spectators at the high school, but I don't believe they have any sort of competition. So if you could clarify, that would be great. Another question.
No competitions at the high school this weekend.
The only thing I can think of is there were photos posted from the gymnastics state final, And I think that would follow Acacia's guidelines since it's a Acacia hosted event, I believe. So
Well,
that's, yeah.
we will have some control over, some of that. I mean, it's hosted at our facility. For example, we were supposed to host sub-state volleyball. Because of our limitations locally, we did not host that. We hosted like the first round of state here, but based upon the mode at that time. So they did shift to another location.
And do we have any updates on COVID numbers from last night's board meeting, or is that the last
Oh,
one?
from last night? I mean, I can give you the stuff from last night. I haven't looked at numbers today. I haven't had a chance to do that. When we look at our local numbers that I had presented last night to the board, and all this stuff is on board docs too, so you could always find these. But right now, and always remember, like when I give these, like the cases, those aren't necessarily active cases. It's just the total number of cases since we've started. But quarantines are active. Like as of the 7th of November was when I pulled the quarantine numbers on kids. We had 258. I did look earlier today. I think we're over 300 now, quarantines. Staff, we had 64 on 11/6 quarantines, okay? We had 50 positive cases yesterday. Once again, some of those cases are recovered cases and back, but 27 students and 23 staff. So, it's here and it's in our community. So those are the statistics.
Okay, Mandy, I'm seeing your questions now. That's more of a question for the athletic director, and he's not here right now. So let me look into that and I'll get back to you. And then just another question that we've gotten, and something important, remote Wednesdays start next Wednesday. So not tomorrow, but the next week. Can you just explain again what those are, why we have them, and just remind people that, everybody, but I believe Cooper and Opportunity Academy will be at home?
That is correct. That is correct. On the 18th of November and the 2nd of December are the remote Wednesday. So all modes will be remote learning modes on those 2 days, just those 2 days. Unless they're in remote like what they are right now currently at the high school through Thanksgiving.
And I know we don't divide it up into specific schools, but do you have the number of students by grade band that tested positive or not? Okay.
And I wouldn't give it by grade, by grade level. I'd give it by secondary, elementary, middle. And I just, I don't have that data right here. I mean, I've provided that data on weekly notes. I believe I give that on weekly notes. I have to go back and look for our staff, but I have to go back and calculate that stuff, so I do not have those.
And Michael, whatever he puts in the weekly notes, we generally take and put it in the newsletter that you will receive. So just make sure you keep checking those newsletters that come out every other week to get updates on that. So
I apologize. I send weekly notes to all of our staff here. I apologize for not making that clear.
And then one other question that we've gotten is, can you just re-explain what went into the decision to make whatever the gating criteria we're in now, what we decided last Wednesday, last all the way to Thanksgiving? Because that's one we've gotten a lot too.
Yeah, and that question is a very legitimate question. Obviously, you all know we set up the gating criteria to gauge what we were going to do on a weekly or biweekly basis. One of the pieces of feedback we get from a lot of people, whether it's staff or parents, students, is, we got to stop switching modes. We've got to stay in a mode for an extended period of time. So, my recommendation was up through Christmas, or at least through Thanksgiving, because we want to provide that stability for students, for parents, and for staff. So when you look at what the research says about transmission at different levels, we felt that this was probably there were two recommendations that I had given, and I supported either one of those. And the board makes that final determination. One was to stay, which would be in the original orange mode for everyone, or go into this particular spread where we have K through 4 on site, actually pre-K through 4 on site, 5 through 8 hybrid, and secondary all remote. So once again, it's to provide stability. And we know that, some folks aren't happy with that. We know some folks are happy with that. And we understand your concerns. I want to really, you know, there's no right answers to any of this. And I just want to really get that message out that we understand all of your concerns. We want to value everybody's perspective as it relates to this, whether it's any of my staff members, any of my students, any of my parents. You know, no one is when we make these decisions or look at these, we're not diminishing anybody's role. We're not diminishing anybody's contribution. No one is expendable. No one is expendable. Our teachers have, I've said this before and I'll continue to say it, have worked tremendously hard and continue to do so in the most difficult circumstances teachers have ever had to work in. You as parents are having to confront this stuff either in your workplace or dealing with the school situations and switching back and forth. So that consistency, based upon that feedback, felt was real important. And so we're trying to provide that as best we can. And we know it's not perfect. And I just, I feel for anyone that's really, really upset. I empathize with that. But a decision has to be made and we have to make it and we have to move forward and roll with the punches. The only time we will go remote in a building at any level other than the high school is if we run into staffing issues. And as you know, a couple of weeks ago, we did that. And so I'll work with the board president and we'll make that call. That the pandemic isn't going away until it goes away. And we have to figure out ways to educate kids to the best of our ability while balancing that safety piece. It's just a real difficult time right now for everyone. And we appreciate your patience.
And Alicia, I think your question's better. It's about specific things going on at Chisholm. Why don't you either message me or email me and I will get you connected to the admin there. And then Wendy, can you just explain where you got your data from as far as the 5 active cases? I'm thinking that may be old data.
The cluster?
Yeah, that was probably the clusters. So yeah.
We were identified as a cluster last week. It's kind of, that's identified by the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. All right. And it's real interesting. I meet weekly with at least once a week with a group of area superintendents. We meet every Tuesday morning and several other schools in the area are going to be identified as clusters. But what's really interesting about some of that, when you talk to them, they're saying things like, I don't know why we weren't identified sooner. And I don't know why, for example, in our case, Newton High School was identified last week, but other entities in the area were not identified as clusters that had more active cases than we do. So, things are not going to be perfect as it relates to all of this. But we do have to react to when we do get that information.
And then someone wanted to ask you to clarify, would we ask parents who are picking up or dropping off their students to, also wear masks and social distance if possible?
Well, if they're into our facilities, they need to wear a mask, obviously, and social distance. I mean, folks, this is the biggest thing. Our quarantines are a function of mainly of the social distancing that is or isn't occurring. And there are some times where it just is not avoidable, especially in our educational setting. As you know, we can't social distance in all of our classrooms, especially that's one of the reasons for the hybrid at Santa Fe. We know that that's really, really difficult when it's full in-person attendance. So when you're coming to pick up your kids, yeah, we need you to social distance as best you can. We don't want any groups of adults or people, that are non-family groupings to not participate in that or take part in the social distancing, because that's where our quarantines are developing for the most part. So please wear your mask, folks. I will implore all Harvey County or just area residents, please social distance and wear your mask. We've got to blunt the spread as much as we can.
And I think this question is, are there some classes that still have to go on site? Things like, I'm guessing the CTE classes that we've talked to?
Yeah, CTE classes are on site. There's some special student situations where they're on site more. Yes, absolutely. Okay. It's hard to do. We do have some software for some of our CTE courses, but not all of them. So.
But they're still following all the safety guidelines and everything like that. And they're pretty.
They're supposed to be, yes.
Yeah. And someone was asking if we've started any sort of plan to maybe start catching up some of those students that maybe have fallen behind. I know Sheila and Megan Nagel worked so hard to try to bring everybody along. Have you heard of anything yet?
Well, we are working on that. We're working on a plan for second semester. We're working on a plan for the second 9 weeks too. Obviously, the buildings are, one of my biggest fears is that we're going to lose the kids through cracks, and we know that we are, especially some of our remote students. And I had some of this information yesterday, and it just didn't come up as a function of the conversation last night at the board meeting. But for example, we look at our high school, about 70% of those kids that are struggling in remote were also struggling at this time last year as well, academically. So remote, some folks view remote as maybe an easier path. And if you've struggled academically, it's not necessarily an easier path. Buildings are trying to come up with better mechanisms to reach out to those students who are struggling. And I know in some other instances, it may not necessarily be just about the remote learning, but I would venture to guess that in a large percentage of it, it is because we're so used to education being delivered in the way that it has been for so many years. So we will, if you're struggling as a parent and you've reached out to your principal and you're not seeing what needs to happen, reach out to my office, send us emails, give us phone calls. We want to make sure that we're all on point as it relates to this.
And again, just to clarify, we had another question. We aren't set in the mode that we are in right now. If numbers go up or down, they could change. So when will they be making the next decision for the week after Thanksgiving?
23rd of November, our next board meeting is we're gonna take into account the data, look at what we perceive to be the trends and what the actual trends are, and what extrapolate that out. We're all concerned about the Thanksgiving holiday with folks getting together, and that's when you'll have more transmission because you'll mix groups up. So we'll make that decision on that Monday, the 23rd, for up through the Christmas holiday.
All right. And Vicki had a couple questions for me. She asked if the public can access our newsletter that we send out, and you can. It's on our website, and it's also, we post it on Facebook as well. And then Vicki, again, if you go through board docs, a lot of the times the documents that are public, not all of them will be because of just different confidentiality, they will be attached to each of the different items. So like if it says COVID update, click on that on the left-hand corner and you should see some attachments. One other question we've gotten a lot, can you explain, just, we talk a lot about it in the board meeting, why the thought process behind making pre-K through 4 on site and why that's important maybe for some families?
Well, there's several reasons. One of them is, the science behind the transmission with the littles. It's not like it is with our high school kids, for sure. Okay. That's one of those from the science-based perspective, and keeping those kids in school when they're getting those foundational skills from the educational perspective is very, very important. The other thing too is custodial care. And I know I get a lot of flack for that a little bit, but I do think about that aspect of that, especially for those littles. I don't want a kindergartner at home alone because the parent has to make the decision between being at work and being able to provide food for their kids or staying at home because they don't have any flexibility. So it's a real complex decision for those littles. I think it's a good decision, and I know I have people that disagree with me on that, and I'm okay with that. Once again, I'll re-stress. It's not that I think that our elementary staff is expendable at all. I don't. We're just trying to find that balance. It's not an either or. It's not binary. It's a this and this. So we're trying to find that balance there between that. 5 and 6, I think the same way about 5 and 6. That's where we've got the program at the Y this week going on. We've got about 20 5th or 6th graders that are participating in that in terms of custodial care, which once again, I'm going to give a shout out to Dr. Decker and his crew for putting that on. I think that's important that we have those capacities to do that. But like at Santa Fe, we just don't have the ability to social distance like we would like when we're in full 100% attendance.
And here's something that came up in the board meeting. We are planning on discussing Summit Learning at the next board meeting. Is that correct? So stay tuned on that, Sarah. I think we're at the end of our questions. If we missed any, I will go through. We're actually streaming this on all of our pages for the first time. So I tried to go, if you saw me on my phone, I was going through to the other pages to see if we had any questions there. Do you have anything you'd like to add, Mr. Van Rankin?
I just want to stress to the community a couple of things. The first is obviously, practice good hygiene, social distance, wear your masks. So important that we do everything we can to blunt the spread of the disease. You heard the news on about the potential of a vaccine that has 90% efficacy. That's great news, but that's a ways down the road because the virus is here in our communities and there's that spread potential, which is so much greater than it was in August. The second thing, I don't say this enough publicly probably, but I do want to thank all of our staff. I mean, our teachers, our bus drivers, our paraprofessionals, our office staff, our custodial maintenance folks. They're working so hard and they are sacrificing an awful lot, for the families here in the district. And I don't say that enough probably, but I want to make sure that people understand that, that they truly are really, really doing the best they can to provide for your children and for the children of the Newton School community. So, and thank you parents and community for the continued support. I know that what we're doing is not easy for anybody. So, but thanks all for the support.
All right, and thank you everybody for watching, and thank you, Mr. Van Rankin, for taking the time to be here.
Absolutely.